Hello and welcome to a bonus edition of the Ornstein and Chapman Podcast. David has gone rogue for this podcast and has gone to do an interview all by himself. But in order that I still feel involved, they've allowed me to do the introduction. So here I am standing in my kitchen doing the intro into my phone. And this is a special podcast because David has been to interview the former director of football at Tottenham and Liverpool, Damien Comolli. In this episode, you will hear him talk about how the signing of Jordan Henderson almost got him sacked, Luis Suarez and the worst moment of his career, what he really thinks about Daniel Levy, and also why he has walked out on his latest job at Fenerbahce. To take you through it all, here's David.
Well, Damien, thanks for joining us on the Ornstein and Chapman podcast on a visit to London. We've got the privilege of speaking to you before you shoot off to a game, so thank you for your time. But first, could you tell us a bit more about Fenerbahce, why you left, what happened? Because it's a story that I don't feel has properly penetrated the UK media like it has in Turkey. So just tell us what happened there. Where to begin?
It's got to be difficult to summarize 18 or 19 months in a few sentences, but basically I've served my notice. I resigned on the 25th of February 2019, so a year ago, because I didn't feel the environment was right. I didn't feel we could put a structure in place that would take the club forward, which is why I've been brought in the first place, for a 3 years contract, which now in football is becoming long term. And I was really not comfortable in that environment a year ago. So I served my notice, I resigned, and then I had two choices: either to wait and see what happens, and hoping that the club will let me go, or I had to pay up 12 months of my salary to the club. And obviously that's something I couldn't do. And I've asked the board many times to leave, and they refused for me to leave until about a month, 6 weeks ago, where really, there was I just couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't see the end of the light at the end of the tunnel, and I had to say it, publicly. I tweeted for the first time in my life. I never had any social media account or anything like this. I had to open one. And then she said, this is not right, and we need to do something about it. So based on this, then the club has accepted to let me go.
What was not right? The president was buying players, from what I read on your Twitter posts.
Well, yeah, it's in public domain, so there is no confidentiality on this. Yeah, the president decided to sign a player. The coach and myself didn't know he was coming. Which, I respected his decision, and I said at the time, someone who invests so much of his time and his money into the club, and he's the president, so he's allowed to do what he wants to do with it. But obviously I was not comfortable with that. And then there was, if I resigned a year ago today, or a year ago yesterday, actually, there was some reason, and I thought the situation was manageable throughout. We had very, a great summer transfer window. I think Fenerbahce had the best team in the league, or should have the best team, certainly the best players in the league, and things were not working out. So that's where I had to make a decision. I think there is so much negativity around the club and inside the club that the huge frustration for me is the first time I faced this in my career. Our two, and those players are common names. I mean, people will be familiar with those names in England. Last season we signed Islam Slimani on loan from Leicester, and then we signed Andre Ayew on loan from Swansea. They were our two biggest recruits, and they must have scored 3 goals between the two of them. And they were deemed, seen as massive failure. They were a disaster, etc. And I kept saying, those players are good players. We have a problem internally if those players don't deliver. And then this season, Andre Ayew plays for Swansea. I was checking his stats. He played 33, scored 13 at 5 assists for winger. It's great figures. He didn't even have 5 assists with Fenerbahce last season. And Slimani has taken the French league, like a storm. He's played 17, scored 9 and had 7 assists. And I am saying to people at the club, in Istanbul, in Fenerbahce, we have a problem. because if they deliver before they come and deliver after they left, we have to question ourselves. And people will not hear it, will just not take it. So all this negativity, uncertainty made me very, very uncomfortable, and that's why I decided to leave.
I find it quite funny how I used to interview you years ago when the idea of a sporting director or technical director was so foreign in England that we needed people to speak about it, to educate us in the British media, because it was so rare. Now it's rare that clubs don't have a sporting director, and we're making stories about Manchester United need one, Tottenham need one. It seems to have come full circle. Your sort of profession is now finally commonplace. How essential is it to have a good sporting director?
Well, I always remember my first press conference at Spurs. So it was in September or October 2005. All the journalists asked me the same question, and they say, do you think there will be a lot of sporting directors in the future in English football? And I said, every club will have one in the future, and they all laugh. If they didn't laugh, they kill me. Were you there?
I probably was.
So you were probably one of those who were laughing at me at the time. And then, 15 years later, then as you say, the clubs who don't have one, people are screaming for one. Manchester United being one. I will put Spurs in a different category because they've got in Steve Hitchin, the acting sporting director who is doing an outstanding job. He's been doing an outstanding job, and we worked together at Tottenham. We worked together at Liverpool before, and what he's done, the work he's done is great. So I think at the time where I was thinking about this recently, so. Well, when you see football teams coming into stadiums now, you've got two coaches, one for the players and the closed, coaching staff, and one for the backroom staff.
That's right.
And it was the case at Fenerbahce. We traveled with two coaches. And now, if you are a coach, how can you manage a backroom staff and coaching staff where you have more staff than you have players?
It's impossible.
You have to manage 25 millionaires who all want to play, high-profile players, all international players, all on massive money, and then you have to manage. Some clubs have got 20 analysts. If you are a head coach, how can you manage 20 analysts?
Incredible.
7 physios and 5 masseurs and a high-performance department and research department and things like this. It's just not manageable. So, and obviously. You've got all the transfers, the transfer market, the recruitment area, the academy. I mean, the job is so big now, and so I would say complicated and so global that you need a lot of brain power in football clubs, and it cannot only be with one individual.
One question before we leave Fenerbahce that I'm keen to pick your brain on. Vedat Muriqi is a player who has been in the English media a lot. Striker, he's not particularly young, but he's not old yet. He's scoring goals, quite an interesting background. He scored against England at St Mary's and caught a lot of people's eyes. Is he a player that could be coming to the Premier League at some point, do you think?
I think he's got everything to be a Premier League player. You say he's not young. I always say he's a young 25-year-old. The reason being, until 18 months or 19 months ago, he was playing in second division in Turkey, and trust me, it's not the best of leagues. So his progress and improvement have been massive. So he's got so much to learn yet. And when you see his performances, notably with Kosovo against England, where he turned apart Maguire and Keane, and I was calculating between the two of them, it's about £130 million worth of transfer fees, and we paid €3.5 million for this player, and he absolutely destroyed them. So there is a lot of room for improvement in his better coaching, in his better structure in the team. I felt so sorry for him at Fenerbahce the time I was there, to see that such a good player didn't get more opportunities to score just because the team needs some structure offensively that he hasn't got. So if he gets, I compare him all the time with Olivier Giroud, because I think he's more advanced than Giroud at the same age, but Giroud made two key great decisions. He went to Montpellier from French second division, won the league with Montpellier in one season, and then moved to Arsenal, and then came across Arsene Wenger, who made him the player he is. So this player is Olivier Giroud. He needs to find his Arsene Wenger, who's going to develop him. And if I was sporting director of a club in the Premier League, okay, if you are Man City, maybe he's not ready for that, Man City or Liverpool, but he's certainly ready for 95% of the other clubs in the Premier League.
And have they been watching him, some of them?
Well, yeah, all the times we've been there, we kept getting ticket requests and people calling us and what do you think about him, and people grabbing us at games and our senior player is really doing great. And obviously the game at Southampton when we played against England, he was outstanding. Kosovo are still in the running for qualification for the European Championship. They play in Macedonia on the 22nd of March. Game I'm planning to attend. Because there is a former Fenerbahce player in Macedonia and a current Fenerbahce player in Kosovo. So if they do qualify for the European Championship and then he does well there, his price will go through the roof, And on top of that, physically he's got incredible stats. He can run all day, he can sprint all day. He's dedicated, he's professional, he's fluent in English. He ticks so many boxes, he's scary.
To a time that many people here will remember you for, Liverpool. Liverpool are now on course for the Premier League title. They're flying towards it. They're already European champions. They could retain that title. It's building to be one of the most special times in Liverpool's history. But it was a time that was started by FSG, Fenway Sports Group, and their first appointment of note was you. So can you take us back to that time? What was it like, their approach to you? What were they saying? What did you know that they had this plan and that it could come to fruition? And what do you make of what's happening there now?
First of all, they've approached me because there is a relationship between them and Billy Bean, Bonnie Bean, being remembered as the Moneyball person, both the book and the movie. And they were looking for someone who could run the club and have a data-driven approach, which I had when I was at Tottenham and then at Liverpool. So I think that's the first reason why they've approached me. Then we try to put things together, a plan, long term for the academy, etc., etc. We signed some good players, decent players.
Yep.
I also knew when I took the job, because by total coincidence, a few months before I took the Liverpool job, I read a book called The Green Monster, and the book was on the story of the Boston Red Sox and the Fenway Sports Group, because they own that team as well, baseball team. And I could see that they will be absolutely ruthless if they didn't feel comfortable with something. And they were ruthless with me at the time. I still feel it was an injustice. We won first of three trophies since 2007, I think it was.
Yep.
We got to the cup final as well. So 2 finals in the same season. We had no money. We had to borrow money from them to buy players. We had to borrow money from them to buy Luis Suarez. I was begging them to give me 21 million to buy Luis Suarez. And they told me, that money you are spending in January is your summer transfer budget, so you won't have it in the summer. I said, no problem. Just
get
so
him.
There was no money. The wage bill was through the roof. We had potential financial fair play issues. I mean, everybody knows the story, with the previous ownership as well, with Hicks and Gillette. So it was a totally different context. So I always felt that something, could happen, and I think. After I left, then they changed the structure of the club at ownership level. Mike Gordon took over from John Henry and Tom Werner, and then he brought stability in the way they run the football club. And then the rest is history. And it's great for Liverpool, it's great for English football, and it's great for Liverpool.
What's John Henry and Tom Werner like? You spent time with them, I think, in their homes or around the time you were negotiating to take the job. Tell our audiences a bit more about the people that are running Liverpool now.
Well, I really think that Mike Gordon, who actually, my understanding, runs the club day to day now.
Yeah, that's right.
He's the one I knew probably the least, because he came onto the scene towards the end of my time there. I connected with him very quickly because you could see he's the one who's got the best football understanding. And I learned afterwards that actually he tried to buy Liverpool before Emery and Tom Werner did, and they didn't know that, even though they were partnered within SVG. He tried to create a syndicate, of money, of people, investors, to buy
consortium,
a consortium before Emery and Tom Werner. So I can't talk too much about him, except that I'm hearing very good things and the way he runs the club. John Henry is very analytic driven, he's quite cold. Straight to the point. Tom Werner is he's warm. He comes from the entertainment business, so extremely successful at his job. So both are very extremely successful. So different personality, then complement each other quite well. Managing up was a challenge. Time difference, distance, etc. And they live in different places as well within the US. So it was a challenge. I think they made the decision with me to part ways. I think they panicked, and I think they lacked experience, because I think we were on the right path and we had the right players and the right ingredients. And I remember, so they came, they sacked me a week late, then they left, and then John Henry came a few days later, like a week later, and then I had reviews and meeting with my staff, and some of my former staff or colleague called me and say, "You won't believe what he said. He said in a meeting, 'Oh my God, I sacked the wrong person.'" So
wow.
So obviously that stayed with me until this day. But it's the way it is. It's football.
They said they had sacked the wrong person.
John Henry said it to a couple of people at the club when they did the reviews and the meeting on my, after my departure.
On what basis?
I don't know, because it's the type of thing that when you hear this, you want to just put the phone down and go, and either you take a cold shower or you go on a jog, you go running for about an hour and a half, and you want to empty your brain.
One of those staff that you mentioned is Michael Edwards, who is now essentially running the show on the ground at Melwood and Anfield, along with the likes of Mike Gordon. Link between the sort of board and Jurgen Klopp, I guess. I'd love to know more about Michael Edwards.
Well, I was looking for somebody. I wanted to create an analytics department, and I didn't know where to start in terms of. I didn't know where to start in terms of structure and what I wanted in it. So data, from where, how to use the data, etc. But I was looking for the right person, and I wanted someone who had both a football background and an analytics background, because the most difficult thing when you deal with data is to be able to make sense of the data, point one, but more importantly, to transmit the data to the coaches or to players in a way that they can make sense out of it, and that will be useful to them. And that doesn't come around very often, especially we're talking about 8, 9 years ago. So I asked a few people around the game, and I actually asked one of the data provider who was working in the Premier League at the time. I said, okay, I'm looking for that type of guy. Who is the best one? And one of them told me Michael Edwards at Tottenham. So everybody thought I worked with Michael at Tottenham, because obviously I was at Spurs before. But it was not the case. I never worked with him. So I called him. I said, this is what I'm planning. That's the position I'm planning to create. Are you interested? So we had a couple of meetings, and then he took the job. He's a very, very bright guy, very bright. I mean, we didn't work over there for a long period of time, but when I left, I told him, you're going to take over. He said, no way. I said, I'm sure they're going to make you sporting director at some point and give you more responsibilities. And obviously when Brendan Rodgers came in and said, I never worked with a sporting director, blah, blah, which I never believed. I thought, it's just Michael would just wait there for a while, and then they're probably going to create that position later on, because with the US sports ownership people, every team has got what they call a general manager, or president of football operation, or baseball operation, or basketball operation. So I was sure they would create that job at some point, or recreate that jump because it's the job I had, which they did.
You may feel that their decision was an injustice on you, but did you know or did you sense with the structure and the personnel that they were putting in place that they would go on to enjoy the success that they're seeing today?
No, because it was impossible to say at the time. I thought our academy structure was very good at the time, led by Frank McParland and Pep Segura. Pep Segura, who then became general manager of FC Barcelona a few years later, with a lot of success. He just left the club. He's one of the best football brain I've ever came across in my career. Pep, he's just amazing at reading the game, understanding the game, seeing the game. So I thought we had a great academy set up that will produce players. I thought the team needed reinforcement, but again, we didn't have money. So they had to make a decision, investing a lot of money, which they did later on. And then it really started with Luis. I think Luis Suarez, the year they missed the championship just by was it a point or something, or 2 points?
Just slightly.
I thought Luis was kind of catalyst of this, and he really took the team and the club into a different dimension, and they came so close from winning the title. Then things went south when he left, and then they made the right appointment. When I think they made two key decisions after that: is one, to appoint Klopp, and two, to organize the club around Michael Edwards and having another sporting director. And that put them onto the right tracks.
One of the players you signed was Jordan Henderson, who is now the captain. He lifted the European Cup and he's on course to lift the Premier League title and perhaps more as well. He's set to go down as one of their modern or maybe all-time greats in that sense in terms of what he might win. Am I right in thinking that the owners attributed that signing as one of the reasons for sacking you to your face?
Yeah, the day they sacked me, they said, you made a big mistake with Jordan Henderson. So I said, are you sure? They said, yeah, it's a big mistake. So I said, okay, well, I think you're wrong. But what can I say? They are the owners of the club, and if they want to make that decision, they make that decision. I was convinced he will be special. I was convinced he will be a Liverpool captain because he had all the attributes to become Liverpool captain as a player and more than anything else as a person. So I'm delighted to see what is achieved. I think there is a lot more to come, as you just said. I think he could win something on the international stage as well. He's going to win the Premier League. I think he's going to win a lot more trophies going forward with Liverpool, and he deserves all of it.
They weren't the only ones who were sceptical about him. There were a lot of people, Sir Alex Ferguson, lots of the media and the public. They wrote Henderson off.
I think what Alex said at the time, he said they didn't go for him because they were concerned about a potential chronic injuries, which we were not concerned about as at all. Pretty much everybody told us we made the wrong decision. We played him out of position, to be fair, and he knew that, and we told him, and Kenny Dalglish told him many times, because he came into Connie's office once. He said, boss, I apologize. I'm sorry. I'm not playing as well as I should be playing. And Kenny said, what are you talking about? I'm very happy with your performances, and I'm sorry to put you to play in the wrong position, but you are very useful for the team at the moment playing there because you are working so hard and you are so disciplined tactically that you playing on the right allows us to play in 4-4-2. So don't worry about it. So there were a lot of doubters, but I think throughout the years I think what amazed me the most is his personality. He's such a winner. That's where he impresses me the most. Just the way he approaches games, how competitive he is. I was talking last year after they lost in Barcelona. I was talking to Arsene Wenger the next day, and I said, what will you do? He said, first of all, the first player I put on the team sheet is Jordan Henderson because he's the soul of that team and he's a winner and he will refuse to give up and he could carry the team forward, on his shoulder during the second leg. And it's exactly what happened.
There are a lot of people who aren't quite sure of his perfect position. Jurgen Klopp's experimented with him, and also England have too. Where should he be playing to excel at his maximum for club and country?
I'm not sure about that. That's why I'm happy not to be a coach. I'm only a sporting director, so I provide the players, and then the coach can find their position. I think at one point I thought he could play holding midfield on a regular basis. Obviously, Jurgen Klopp sees it differently, but he's right, because considering the success they've had, maybe England will play him there next summer, because there is no obvious candidate is there, and he can do that job. He definitely can do that job. I think this kind of number 8, 6-8 position is ideal for him there in the 4-3-3 at Liverpool, because he's got legs, he's got great vision. You know, his first touch, he makes a lot of passes, first touch in the back of the defense that are absolutely killing you when you're trying to defend against him. And you know, it's a great story around him, because we recruited him mainly with data, mainly with using statistics. He came, we were looking at data, looking at another player in the Premier League, and then when we put the data together, so you've got filters, and we looked at filters of, at the time it was chances created, and we're looking at attacking players, and suddenly this kid from Sunderland, who is 20 or 21 year old, he comes as defensive midfield. He comes in as good as data and chances created as a lot of attacking players in the Premier League, and he created as many chances as Steven Gerrard that season. All due respect to Sunderland, he was playing for Sunderland, not for Liverpool, and he was not Steven Gerrard. So I thought, hold on a minute, we're on to something there. And then I remember very well that same day I pulled out his fitness data from the game at Anfield and at Sunderland. He played, and he was through the roof. I mean, he was all charts. He can run all day, he can sprint, he can do whatever you want. And then I called our UK chief scout the same day. I said, I know you've seen Jordan Henderson, just refresh my memory. He said, I love him, and you need to go to see him urgently. I said, yeah, I think you're right. So he was just like a red flag, red flag, or green flag. Let's say red flag, because it's Liverpool. That data gave us, which was backed up by scouting observations, and then Kenny absolutely loved him. And when Kenny met him, Kenny was blown away with his personality, and so was I, actually. So you take all the first filter of recruitment in a big club like this is character and personality. You tick that box. Then you've got the data. Then you've got live scouting, and all those boxes were ticked very, very easily. And the funny side of this story is I had a budget of 15 million. Okay, I couldn't go over the budget, and even that was really difficult for Kenny and I to get 15 million from the owners for Jordan. And one of the last discussions I had with the then Sunderland chairman was Niall Quinn. He said, Damien, you don't realise, because they wanted a lot more than 15. He said, you don't realise how good he is and his character and personality. He said the last time they played the derby against Newcastle, towards the end of the game, he took a free kick, and then the ball flew into the stands, and he got a lot of sticks from the Newcastle fans. He said the following week, he took 300 free kicks at training because he was so mad of himself. And I put the phone down, and I thought, if that's the type of personality, we should do everything we can do to get him. And then I went up to 60. I always remember 16.75 million, to the great displeasure of the others, who absolutely slaughtered me on the phone.
Yeah.
And I called Kenny. I said, Kenny, you need to help me on that one. He said, it's a great deal. If they want to call me, they should call me. I will tell them we did a great deal. And that's the story.
And it was easy to execute it with the player in the end.
The player was very easy.
Yeah.
I mean, the player was very, very easy because he was desperate to come. I mean, I would not say he was desperate to come, but I know he had meeting with United. I know he had meeting with Arsenal, and he had meeting with us. And then very, very early he said, "Oh, it's Liverpool and nothing else."
Can you take us inside that day in 2011 when Fernando Torres ended up moving from Liverpool to Chelsea and Andy Carroll coming from Newcastle to Liverpool. You could probably write a book on it, but just in a nutshell, what was it like inside the boardroom or wherever you were that day? Maybe you weren't in a boardroom.
I do remember the day, as you can imagine, but it all started the night before, because I had days and days of discussion with Fernando Torres and his agent. I said, you cannot go, we can't afford to let you go. We brought Luis Suarez to play with you, and now you want to go. And he told me very late during the window as well. And then we kept saying to Chelsea, he's not for sale, and Chelsea kept bidding and higher and higher and higher, up to the point where they got to a figure that we couldn't say no to, because it was a figure written in Fernando's contract.
I see.
And then we kind of had a moral agreement. Obviously, it was done before we arrived, that if somebody reached that level, we had to let him go. And to the amazement of everybody at the club, Chelsea got to that figure. So that was one thing. And then I think the night before deadline day, I had a call from someone who had nothing to do with transfers, who said, look, I just heard from Newcastle German, and they will entertain the sale of Andy Carroll. And we were stuck at the time because Fernando was going and we didn't know who to replace him with. So I kind of agreed the deal with Newcastle that night. Then the next day they read in the newspaper how much we were getting for Torres, so they changed the deal and increased by 5 million, which absolutely drove me crazy. Anyway, so we decided to do we kind of decided to do it, and then I'm waiting for the owners to wake up in America. At the same time, we are finishing Luis Suarez transfer. So Luis is in my office, and there's people going and leaving, and his wife was there, his daughter was there, and they are lovely, etc. And then at one point, I remember very well, I thought I need to think about this, and I went into Kenny's office. It was dark. And I for about an hour and a half, I'm thinking, okay, what do we do? Do we do the Carroll transfer? We don't do it? What are the implications? And then I emailed the owners and I said, I need a conference call with you. So we did a conference call, the owners, Kenny, I think the chief executive at the time, and myself. And I said, this is the deal. This is what we can do with it. This is the risk. This is what we can not do if we decide not to do anything. And then we voted, and then we knew we were paying over the odds with Andy, but he was young, he was English, and at the time I told them, I said, if things don't work out, we'll sell him for 20 million to a West Ham, back to Newcastle, Aston Villa, and he was sold for 20 million to West Ham actually a few years later. So it's the scenario I had in my mind at the time. Either it was a massive hit, massive success, or it was not. But then there was some money still to be made, So we knew we were overpaying, but we were also getting incredible money for Torres, and Chelsea were grossly overpaying as well at the same time. So that was the day, and then I got around 5 o'clock. I think we decided to go for it once we voted all together. And then I got on the phone to the agent of Andy, and then he starts saying, I want this and I want that, and this is not right. And if you pay 35 million, I want more money. I said, look, it's going to be very simple. This is my offer. It's 5 o'clock. The window shuts in 6 hours. So you take it or you leave it. It's up to you. I can't play games. And he said, I'll call you back. He called me back. He said, it's all agreed. And then we organized a helicopter, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to sign both transfer agreements just because I didn't want anybody to get blamed for it in the future. If suddenly Torres ends up being 100 million players and Andy ends up being a disaster. So I remember the club secretary at the time, she said, I'm going to sign the transfer agreement. I said, no, don't. It's my responsibility. I'm going to put my signature and my name to it. If things don't work, nobody can blame anybody but me. And I remember signing it was quite strange. You signed 50 million transfer on one side and 35 on the other side.
Wow. You mentioned Luis Suarez. Before I move it on from Liverpool, we could speak for hours. This is crazy. But you mentioned Luis Suarez. You were very closely involved in the situation involving Luis Suarez and Patrice Evra. And recently, Jamie Carragher spoke on the subject, and he apologised for the stance of the Liverpool players at the time, wearing the T-shirts in support of Suarez. He apologised to Patrice Evra, who was a fellow Frenchman of yours. Do you look back on that situation with any regrets? I think you had to make a statement on the day.
I regret pretty much everything. I regret our attitude. I regret the way we approached it. I regret my reaction in the FA tribunal, because I sat throughout, the 2 or 3 days we were there, and I didn't react well when they gave the sentence, because I didn't agree at the time. It's probably the worst moment of my career. Because of frustration, because I think we kind of isolated ourselves from the rest of the world, and it was the wrong thing to do. We should have taken advice from outside, maybe legal advice, but PR advice. Somebody who was not caught in the storm, I'll say, oh, hold on a minute, you should wake up there, because the reality outside is not what you are seeing or feeling internally. I think the fact he was a player for Manchester United, almost made things for us 1,000 times worse than they should have been, and I think we reacted even in a worse way because it was Manchester United and the rivalry between the two clubs. I feel sorry. I feel we didn't protect and we didn't look after Luis as we should have. We didn't give him the defense he should have got. We didn't give him the advice he should have got. And that's where, usually I see the players as my child, especially now I'm getting older, and some of them I've got the age of my kids, and and it's the first time I felt I let a player down for a lot of reasons. We let the club down. We let football down probably as well, because we acted the wrong way. But the only excuse I can find, if I can find an excuse, is that none of us had ever faced anything like this before, and we just didn't know how to handle it. And I mean, from the owner down, you should have seen the reaction of the owners towards all this. They were more than on side, with us and wanting to be on Luis's side. So even on a cheap level or board level, where you think, okay, those people are removed from the situation and they can help. They were caught in the storm as emotionally as much as we were. So it was all wrong. It was all wrong.
Daniel Levy, you probably know him better than most people. He very rarely speaks. He gave an interview recently about the stadium, but that's about it. But can you give us a little bit of insight into him? Is he good for Tottenham? Is he bad for Tottenham? Is the truth somewhere in the middle? What on earth is he like?
Having in the same sentence Daniel Levy and bad for Tottenham is a shock for me, because I was discussing this with Billy Bean when I was over in the States, and Billy said something very interesting. Keeping in mind that Billy is probably one of the best sports executives of all time. And he said what people should understand is that Daniel Levy, across all sports around the planet, is one of the best executives at the moment. If you had to do a top 5 of the best sports executive in the world at the moment, you will include Daniel in it. He's just an incredible brain. He's just what he's achieved. He's not only intelligent, but extremely intelligent, but he's incredibly driven. And I've been build a stadium like he has. I've been build a training ground that we did it together. But I would build when I was there. I would build a training, or we created it. I would build a stadium that is built. That is the best stadium in the world. I was in Miami for the Super Bowl. I can guarantee you the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami is 1/10 of the stadium at Spurs. It's just amazing. I had the privilege. They invited me there for a game. It's just astonishing, the quality of that stadium. He delivered the stadium. He's delivered a fantastic product on the pitch for 5 or 6 years running. They've got the best training ground in the industry. give me one example of somebody who took a club with an old stadium, poor training ground, and then about 15 years later, it's the best stadium in the world, it's the best training ground in the world. They've got incredible assets in the team. They took that. I mean, who would that say that Spurs will get into the Champions League final? Honestly, So people can say, "Oh, but they haven't spent enough money, and they were one player short from winning the league, and one player short from winning the Champions League." But remember what Tottenham was. If I tell you the team that we had in 2005. And we finished 5th with that team, to the team that is competing and got to the Champions League final, people will laugh, So they are in a different planet, and it's all thanks to him. He's got great people around him. He's got a great board. He's probably the most unified board in football, the most forward-thinking, adaptable, flexible board. They are clever, they are shrewd commercially, they did great job, doing the Nike deal and sponsorship, etc. They sold the seats at the stadium. They are very, very, very good.
Yet there is a group of supporters who want ENIC out. You see it on social media and on the message groups. They think that Daniel Levy and ENIC are holding Tottenham back from making the step up to actually winning trophies.
I don't know what to say.
Your look says it all.
I think it's so ludicrous. I don't know what to say. They should have a statue of Daniel Levy in front of the stadium. That's what I will say.
Seriously?
Of course. I mean, look, they pay less. Until now, they couldn't compete wages-wise, transfer fee-wise. They just couldn't compete. And despite that, they managed to compete at the very top, to finish second or third, to get to the Champions League final. Okay, they could have won maybe a cup or something like this. Okay, fine, I agree with that. But in the end, Daniel took the club into a dimension that personally, I follow the club very closely, and I'm very friendly with Daniel and other people. I would have never thought he will take that club that quickly into that dimension. Imagine now. Would you say Spurs are ahead of Arsenal? They are. Commercially, they are. Football-wise, they are. On every front. Do you think 5 years ago, before Mourinho arrived, if you would have said Spurs will be ahead of Arsenal in 5 years' time, you would have said there is no chance. No chance. And they are. And there is nobody else who's done that in Europe over the last 15 years.
Is Jose Mourinho the right manager to help them make that step up to trophies? Or is it going to end in tears?
If you look at it from the outside, you think there cannot be any alignment between ownership and the manager because of his past. He wants ready-made players. Yeah. He wants to win straight away. Spurs is about developing players, finding young talent. Either they produce them or they buy them from the outside and then turn them into all-stars. And I had this discussion with Daniel several times. Your DNA until now at Tottenham was not to buy stars, but was to make stars and develop players into all-stars. And they've been fantastic at it because of, mainly in the last few years, because of Mauricio's Pochettino coaching skills and the trust he put in young players. So now, from the outside, obviously, you people will think there is no alignment between Jose Mourinho and what Spurs are. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. The difficulty is when you interview managers, and I've been through this many, many times, because they want the job, they tell you, "Oh yeah, I'll respect your culture. I buy into what you're trying to achieve." And then once they are in the job, they're a different beast, and they forgot what they told you during the interview process. So it's not going to happen with Daniel. If Jose Mourinho wants to act differently, he will be the loser, and Daniel will be the winner in that fight. And rightly so, because he owns the club, and he puts his money into it. So I think Jose Mourinho will have to adapt to the way Spurs, to their business model, to their culture, to their values, to their DNA. And if that's the case, there is no reason for it to end in tears. If that's not the case, it will end in tears.
Are we already seeing some of the old Jose in not using Troy Parrott, not using so much Ryan Sessegnon, and a lot of Spurs fans saying, come on, use these guys while the key players like Harry Kane and Heung-min Son are out injured?
But Mauricio was not using Sessegnon either. So, look, this season is not a season to judge Mauricio to judge Jose Mourinho or the relationship or the alignments between the board and the coaching staff. We'll see what happens from next season. We'll see what happens in the summer transfer window, and then we can start commenting on it.
You mentioned a while ago about a director of football in Manchester United. To me, and I've said it a number of times on this podcast, it's an absolute no-brainer. Why do Manchester United not have one? Do they need one? And is that appointment key to their chances of getting back or getting to where they want to be?
I think every club needs a sporting director. So the answer is yes, they do need one. I think the size and the magnitude of Manchester United, I was reading recently in the press, they are creating a massive project to expand their academy talent pools to pick from, in the Northwest, etc.
Yeah, that's right.
That needs coordination, that needs leadership. It will come from the academy people and from Nicky, but obviously, but then is how do you align first team academy, scouting, etc. And that having a director of football in place with power will help massively. Why they don't have one, I don't know. It's because they've chosen until now not to have one. Because if Manchester United come out and say we are looking for a director of football, on the same day they'll get probably around 3,000 CVs, and 50 of the best and 50 of the best in the world. Just to give you an idea about the industry, we advertise on my LinkedIn account as sporting director of Fenerbahce, and on the club LinkedIn account, we advertise for a head of coaching and methodology for our academy at Fenerbahce. We received 406 applications.
Incredible. So
you can imagine the kind of interest that Manchester United would attract for a job like this, or for any job, as a matter of fact. So yes, I'm convinced they need one. When are they going to do it? Are they going to do it? With what level of duties and responsibility? That's for them to decide. But I think if they were to have the right person into that job to give all the support that the manager needs, all the support to the academy needs to link between the two, the academy and the first team, which is part of the DNA of Manchester United, I think that will help them massively to take their project onto a different level, like Liverpool did, like Spurs did with Sivicin, or many other clubs.
So what might be holding them back? The owners not having faith in that model? Ed Woodward not wanting to relinquish that power?
I don't know, David. This I can't comment because I really don't know.
Do you know Ed Woodward? And if so, does he get an unfair deal off the public and the fans who have been criticising him so much?
I met with Ed a few times, including privately, but it's not related to any job at Manchester United. He comes across as someone very bright, very, very hardworking. He's also driven. I think what they keep feeding to the press, looking from the outside, you will know better than I do. That they believe in this project, they believe in the current manager, they believe what they are doing is right, and then it will be fruitful in the end. I think they genuinely believe in this, and I think I think they are convinced they are going to the right direction, and they are not going to move from that. And you have to give them credit for this, because it's better to have somebody in charge who actually has got a strategy, believe what he is doing, has got a vision, and stick to it, than to have someone who changed strategy over 3 months or has got no strategy whatsoever. That doesn't work either. So I respect him a lot for that, because he seems to be very focused, and he seems to be convinced on how things should be done and delivered, and what Manchester United should look like in the future. And I think he needs time. We need to give them time. The problem is it's Manchester United.
You also worked at Arsenal. You mentioned earlier that you still speak to Arsene Wenger. What does he make of what's going on there? What do you make of what's going on there at Arsenal? Is Mikel Arteta the right man to lead them forward to success, and the new structure that they've got in place could not be more different to the structure when you were there and when Arsene was there?
Well, I'm not. I know Arsene doesn't want to talk about Arsenal, so I'm certainly not going to talk on his behalf about Arsenal. And to be perfectly honest with you, we had lunch last week in Paris, and we didn't talk about Arsenal once. I think throughout the lunch we talked about football, his job at FIFA, etc., etc. My experience, my job at Fenerbahce, but we didn't talk about Arsenal. So I don't really know what he thinks. What do I think? I think they made the wrong appointment to start when the new team came in, the new board or executive football executive came in. I think Emery was the wrong appointment. It's interesting that they tried to go back to some Arsenal DNA by appointing Arteta because he knows the club. He's captained the club. And appointing Edu as well as a sporting director or technical director. So again, it's very early in the project. I think the difficulty, one of the two difficulties I see coming because I've experienced those before. One, they've got their best player with 1 year left on his contract. It's Aubameyang. So they need to keep him, because he's really the difference maker in that team, and without him it will not be the same team. And they've got a massive decision to make in the summer. So if they don't extend his contract between now and the transfer window, then they need to decide, they let him go on a free the following season, 2021, or they have to sell. And that's a massive decision. And I don't think top four will be enough for him. I think he's at the point of his career where he wants to win. So they need to convince him that they can win from next season. And that's going to be extremely challenging. And the second aspect is they need Pepe to do well. And that's what I was saying, relating to some of my previous experience. When you spend 80 million on a player and he doesn't perform, you have a problem. You have a problem as a club. You have a problem as a coach, because what do you do with him? You have to trust him. As a club, you have to do everything possible to make him successful. And if that player is not successful, it's something that could impact their team for the next 2 or 3 years. Because he's their marquee signing, because he's their key signing, because they invested so much money in him. So he needs to do well.
Why doesn't Arsene Wenger want to talk about Arsenal?
I didn't say he doesn't want to talk about it. I just said in that particular... We haven't spoken about Arsenal for, I don't know, maybe the last 4, 5 or 6 times we spoke, and we speak every week.
It seems surprising to many people that he wouldn't be the director of football there. He's the head of football at FIFA now.
Look, for me, it's very simple. If I was Stan Kroenke, I will call Arsene Wenger. I will say, what position do you want? You want to be executive chairman? You want to be chief executive? You want to be president of football operation? Please, we welcome you at the club and make all the decisions and run the club for us. That's what I will do if I was Stan Kroenke.
You've got things to be doing tonight, so I've got to rattle for you a few questions. You move around European football circles. Is the feeling that Manchester City are going to be banned from the Champions League, or is it too unpredictable to say what's going to happen with CAS and their legal challenge?
Well, I mean, it's not a feeling. It's legal. It's full stop. It's legal. Dot. You don't add anything, because CAS is CAS. It's an independent body. We've had to deal a lot with them at Fenerbahce. We've had financial fair play issues, non-payment, etc., etc. Anyway, so they are independent judges. They are professionals at their job. Nobody will influence them. So they will obey with the rules. So it's not what's the feeling. It's CAS will make a decision based on what they think is right.
Is the feeling in European football that Manchester City are in big trouble here, that they flouted the rules?
Yes. And the feeling is that CAS, nobody can influence CAS. So the feeling is, my gut feeling is that CAS will do what they think is right. And it could be bad for Manchester City.
Would that lead to an exodus of players?
Yes. Because at the moment, a top player doesn't play Champions League. It's unthinkable. So not only I think it will lead to an exodus of players, but it will mean they will struggle to attract players at the same time. If you say to De Bruyne or to Raheem or to Aguero, you're not going to play Champions League for 2 years, that's going to be very, very, very challenging.
1 year be okay?
Yeah, I think 1 year is manageable. 2 years is really a long time. And don't forget that in 2 years there is the World Cup as well in 2022. So to tell players you are not going to play Champions League for 2 years and the second year is a World Cup year where you need to get there at the top of your form, peak of your form, even though it will be a November to December World Cup in Qatar, you need to be seen by your national team manager, etc., etc. I think that will be extremely challenging.
Are their rivals going to be launching legal challenges against Manchester City, against UEFA or whoever, because they missed out on trophies, they missed out on Champions League qualification, they missed out on revenues? Or do you think that is a altogether too complicated subject to get into?
I think it's a too complicated subject to get into. I think what has happened at UEFA level is different than what happens at Premier League level. The financial fair play rules, both sets of rules are different for the Premier League and for UEFA. They are a lot more flexible in the Premier League than they are for UEFA. So on which legal ground the clubs will go after them? Will it be on UEFA financial fair play? Will it be on Premier League financial fair play? Have they... let's assume they bend the rules. Have they bent the rules domestically or have they bent the rules only internationally at UEFA level? I'm not a solicitor. I'm not a QC. So that's too technical for me to say. But personally, my gut feeling is that it will be very, very complicated to do.
A few people high up within Premier League clubs have said this is just going to drive Manchester City to push with other clubs for a breakaway Super League, to come away from all of this, come away from financial restrictions and set up their own closed shop.
I don't think they'll get any support from the other big five in the Premier League, because I don't think the other big teams in the Premier League have got any appetite for this. If there is appetite on the European level, it's only a few clubs. I don't think it's the case in the Premier League. Part of me feels sorry for Manchester City because I've got great respect for what they've achieved until now, because they've achieved it with money, but they've put structure in place, they've got strategy, you know what their culture is, you know what their values are, you know how they scout, how they recruit, how they develop players, you know what type of players they want to hire, to sign. When you see their youth team play, you see exactly what they want to achieve. They push mental well-being to an extent that probably is unknown in world football. As Arsene said a few years ago, he said they've got petrol and ideas, which is he translated from a French saying. And sometimes, I've got a lot less
petrol
respect.
And ideas.
Yeah. So I've got a lot less respect and time for people who just throw money at it. They throw money at it, but they also achieve something great beyond the money aspect. And for that, I've got a lot of respect.
I think I'll just finish by asking you one thing about you. We've talked about the clubs that you worked for. In the case of Tottenham and Liverpool, they've gone on to much better things long after your departure. Do you feel that you helped lay the foundations at those clubs and your work wasn't appreciated until much later? And do you think you get unfair criticism from public, press, fans?
I don't read the press. I was not on social media until a few weeks ago, so I don't know about criticism or anything like this. I do care a lot about judgment from my peers or from people working above me. That's the most important thing for me. And if I keep getting jobs, it means that I've got some credibility on the market. And if clubs I've left or people I work with call me and ask me for advice, it means that they value my opinion. That's the most important thing for me, a lot more than PR or my image in the public or amongst the fans. That really is absolutely at the bottom of anything I do. Most important thing is what football people think about me. They want my opinion, they ask for advice. I get job offers on a regular basis, so that's also very important.
Yeah, good.
And do I feel I laid on foundations? Yeah, a little bit. when Spurs played Liverpool in the Champions League final, and both sporting directors that worked under me, one I took as an analyst, and then he ended up sporting director of Liverpool, and then the other one was a local scout, and he ends up the sporting director of Spurs. It's, Stevie Chin and Michael Edwards. I'm delighted for them, absolutely delighted, and I'm glad that at some point in their career I've helped them getting to where they are.
I think that's the perfect way to end it. We thank you very much for joining us on the Ornstein and Chapman podcast, and good luck with whatever comes next.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.